Muriro on Monday. Brace yourself. It's a hard hat area.
Star FM sounding good all the time. Thank you for making us your station of choice. I am Linda Muriro, and as always, at a time, on a day and time as this, we discuss issues keeping Zimbabweans awake at night. Now, last week, President Emmerson Mnangagwa, through the Presidential Powers Regulations, extended the use of the multi-currency regime until 2030. President Mnangagwa made the extension through statutory instrument SI 218 of 2023. The multi-currency system was initially supposed to end its usage at the end of 2025. Now, in June last year, the government promulgated SI 118A of 2022, which provided for the multi-currency system to run for 5 years. The SI entrenched into law the multi-currency regime for the entire period of the National Development Strategy 1 NDS1, government's 5-year economic blueprint adopted in 2020 and running through to December 2025. Now, the latest development has sparked mixed reactions among Zimbabweans, with some sections seeing it as a practical move to maintain stability and stimulate economic growth. Others, on the other hand, argue that the move is admission of government's inability to address the country's economic challenges and regaining control of its own currency. Tonight, we discuss this in greater detail. Stay with us.
This is Muriro on Monday on Star FM. Muriro on Monday. Brace yourself. It's a hard hat area.
And for our discussion tonight, we have from the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe, Baz Fanwell Mutogo, and economist Vince Musewe, from the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers, Danford Mutashu, and we are expecting to be joined by Krai Macheza from the Confederation of the Zimbabwe Industries, CZI. Now, to begin with, I will start with you, Danford, as the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers. What do you make of the extension of the multi-currency system?
Of the multi-currency system.
All right, and Fanwell, what does the extension of the multi-currency system used to 2030 mean for the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe?
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for having us, actually, in the first instance. I think for the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe and for bankers in general, I think this is a welcome move. It's really a welcome move in the sense that Now it allows us to write contracts with our customers to beyond 2025. I think the limitations in the ADS1 in terms of the expiry, or rather the 2025 limitation, was actually a handicap for us. So now that at least we have got 5 more years to write contracts, I think it's a welcome move for us.
All right, and Vince, your reading of this, what do you make of this extension?
From an economic point of view, it's desirable that at some stage Zimbabwe has its own its own currency. I think that's important. However, what we are doing here is throwing the can down the road, right? You see, if you want to dollarize, there are various things to de-dollarize. There are various things that you have to put in place to ensure that de-dollarization becomes successful, right? And despite the Reserve Bank governor and the Minister of Finance putting some of these into place, there does not seem to be a reduction in the demand for US dollar. Let me give you an example. The IMF did a research on about 85 countries that sought to de-dollarize. And out of those, only 4 successfully completely de-dollarized, right? And the things they did, for example, if you look at Israel, they put alternative assets where you can actually invest in, okay? The Reserve Bank has done that with the gold coins. Okay, they also ensured, for example, that taxes and local payments are done using what? Local currency. The Reserve Bank has also done that. So what I'm saying is that despite us doing the right things that other countries seem to have done, we simply have not addressed the issue, the mindset of the market around the US dollar. The market significantly still wants the US dollar, despite us putting these assets into place. So it then takes us to the fact that the de-dollarization process in Zimbabwe is not an economic-driven issue. It's more of a psychologically driven issue. We have to change the mindset of Zimbabwe on value and pricing of goods and services, and they have to be comfortable first that actually we can use our own currency. Now, why is that? It's an issue of confidence, right? The market does not trust the government that even when they put the policies will be implemented properly. Number 2, when a government does not have meritocracy, when a government is appointing individuals in particular positions that are seen by the market that they do not merit to have those positions, right? That creates further lack of confidence, right? When the market sees corruption carrying on not being addressed, it increases the country risk, right? And the market says, listen, why should I use this particular? So a lot of people get confused to say, what is it? We have to understand what we call the political economy of currency management. It's 60% politics and 40% economic policy.
All right. And issues around confidence are some of issues, obviously, we're going to be talking about. There was a response to an earlier tweet I made earlier on where one of my followers was talking about the issue of confidence. And I had promised that I would pose that question to Baz as far as what is being done to restore confidence in the banking sector, for instance. But coming back to you, Fanwell, tell us the positives around the use of the US dollar, for instance, in Zimbabwe.
The obvious benefit of using the US dollar is the stability. I think if you look back maybe the last few years, we have had an issue with our own currency where it was volatile. And for decision makers, it becomes very difficult to manage business where with a volatile currency. So the US dollar, the stability in the US dollar for bankers, it's an attraction because then you can plan and you know that if you lend today, in 3 years' time, you will still get the same value of your US dollars back. So to us, in fact, I think the first prize is to get our currency stable. And once we get our currency stable, then lending either in US dollar or in Zim dollars to us will be the same. But because our currency is not yet that stable, what it means is that lending in US dollars to us is an attraction, because then we can plan ahead and we know that what value we'll get after we've lent money to our customers.
I am Linda Muriro, and you are tuned to Star FM, sounding good all the time. We are discussing extension of the multi-currency system to 2030 following that SI last week on Friday by the President. And I have in studio the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers, the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe, as well as an economist, and we're hoping to be joined by the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industry. And I know that the consumer is well represented by you, the listener, judging from the messages that are coming through on our studio WhatsApp number, which is 0772162651. And like I mentioned earlier on, I will be getting into those messages. Now, Denford, some industrialists say the use of the US dollar makes locally produced goods uncompetitive on the global market. What is your take on that?
During the multi-currency system, Linda, we have been able to retain our competitiveness because the local market largely uses the local currency, especially through the formal channels. It is the reason why, Linda, as an association, we've continued even to lobby government to ensure that it increases the space and demand for the use and circulation of the local currency. That includes payment of taxes and duties, etc. That will actually then create more demand for the local currency. And unfortunately, we are sitting on an economy that has dollarized itself for about 60%. More than 60% of the economy is actually dollarized. And more to that, Linda, we have a greater part of this economy that is in the shadow economy. So it is the reason why, Linda, in our budget input and proposals to the minister, we have said that it is very critical that the minister attends to the high informalization that the economy has been grappling with, in order not to increase taxes and taxation on the already formalized business, but expand the tax bracket. However, we need to ensure going forward, Linda, that all the government institutions, payment of regulatory and statutory fees is actually in local currency. While we use the US dollar for the sole purposes of importation of capital goods, equipment, etc. Unfortunately, Linda, the environment that we are sitting on as well has used and tested the US dollar, and the appetite largely has actually been tilted towards the US dollar for transactional purposes as well as for saving. So it is our encouragement that our banking institutions create an environment where, of course, people are quite safe and willing to save their monies, keep their monies in the bank other than in the pillows. It is also why you have seen armed robbery cases have increased, because the armed robbers know that people are keeping their large swaths of cash in their homes, businesses are keeping their cash in their offices, and in doing so, probably they're trying to preserve value of whatever that they would have collected. And most businesses right now are actually using the products that they manufacture or rather for the purposes of collecting as much US dollars as possible, given the fact that the auction system was also even reduced to 5 million. So 5 million does not even cater for the majority of companies, SMEs and big businesses that may wish to go to the auction market to procure US dollars for the purposes of importation of raw materials and capital goods. So I would like to believe that the move is commendable, because by and large, most people now have not developed the sufficient confidence on the local currency for them to be able to keep their money, their salaries, their wages, or whatever earnings and incomes in the local currency. So in doing so, government was quite alive to the fact that let's continue with the multi-currency system and gradually move towards dollarization. And I'm happy and would like to actually thank the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe as well as the Ministry of Finance and government at large, because they indicated at the beginning that the de-dollarization process was going to be gradual. It was not going to be an overnight, thing. And hence, where we are now, after assessing the situation on the ground, it is quite prudent that the extension is actually something that had to be done.
Speaking of that, Vince, some have argued that with this SI, we can safely conclude that the de-dollarization drive has been set aside. Your comments on that?
Yeah. First, I think let's understand what de-dollarization is. There's two types of dollarization, okay? In economic terms, there's what is called financial dollarization, where people give assets in US dollar. Right? Then there's real dollarization, where prices and wages are set using the US dollar. Okay. Now, what we have to do here is the tendency or the practice internationally has been that it's the price, setting up local prices and wages in US dollar, that has stopped. The financial dollarization, where assets of individual are kept in US dollar, has actually increased over time as people invest more in US dollar than in the local currency. This does not mean about the Z dollar, Zimbabwe dollar. It's worldwide. It's a worldwide thing. So as Zimbabwe, we are going to have two phases. The first phase is that the local prices and wages and payment of services locally must be done in local currency. That's the first thing we have to do. The second thing, we don't have to go the second route of making sure that people don't hold US dollar. We have to give people the freedom to hold US dollar deposits. So I think it's very important that we change those things. The other thing that I just want to correct here is the issue of the extent of the dollarization of the economy. 90% of deposits are in US dollar. I think you can probably correct me there. So financial dollarization is very high in this economy. It's about 90%. If we then look at the CPI, the consumer price index, the basket, the transactions that are going within the basket of goods and services that each individual buys on a monthly basis, 80% is in US dollar. In other words, people are paying for combis and ZESA and water in only using Zimbabwe dollar. The rest, even they go to a tax shop, they are not using Zim dollar. They're not merely using. So this economy is highly, highly dollarized. And you are not going to succeed by suddenly de-dollarizing it, because it's a complex mesh of things where there is likelihood of significant loss of value of this particular economy. So you have to do it in phases, as my friend says there, right? But you then have to ensure that you understand why people don't want the Zim dollar. That's what you have to understand first. And then you address those issues around there. Because we can theorize here and say, no, people don't prefer the Zim dollar. You know what I'm saying? But we know that the fundamental reason, number one, is because of the Gono experience, the hyperinflation experience. And number two is because people are not comfortable with putting their money in the bank because there are charges for depositing. There are charges for withdrawing money. So people are not really, maybe you can correct me there from the BAs. So there is no attraction to put your money in the bank anyway.
Let's allow Fanwell to just respond to the issues you've raised.
Muriro on Monday. Brace yourself. It's a hard hat area.